Our latest 620 CKRM icon is Perry Nyhus. Perry, I want to start by you telling me about radio. When did you first start listening to radio, and what were you listening to?
I think I was about 10 years old. And the memory I have of it is Dad had gone to Ogama and bought a new half-ton. Frank, I think was the guy's name that sold trucks. Little town dealership. And it had a radio. Most of the old trucks we had, there was just a plate where the radio was. We didn't have radios. And what I remember the most was the Streak was on the radio all the time. And my brother and I are probably 9-ish, 10. And every time the Streak came on, we'd be two guys in this little farm truck and we'd be just chuckling. Because in the 70s, that was a fad, the Streak. So, the amount of times we joked about Ethel streaking, that's my first memory. So I loved it. The other thing is Lawrence Vargo was his name, and he drove the school bus, Brad. And every time we'd turn into McClarty's driveway to pick up the McClarty kids, Johnny Sanderson was on that station. CKCK at the time was a powerhouse, and Lawrence loved that. And Johnny would come on and he'd have a feature called $1 for the Wide Awake Scholar. And we were little kids on the bus, so we thought that was such a cool thing. And the one thing that comes to mind when I think about that is Johnny. So later in life, Dave Sanderson, his son, came to work here. And I asked Dave, how's your dad doing? Would he be interested in talking to a kid about broadcasting? He said, I'm sure he would. So we went over to the Armory in Regina, and we spent the day. We had a burger, we talked about broadcasting. And what I remember about Johnny was he was just a nice man. And I think the other thing that comes to mind about broadcasting, although we didn't have any cabs on our tractors, actually I didn't grow up listening to the radio like a lot of people did. What comes to mind for me the most, though, is driving to Regina and seeing the towers on Highway 6 and the lights flashing. And just being a kid in the back of my parents' vehicle and thinking, boy, the radio station, I thought it'd be much bigger than that. I thought the little engineer shack or transmitter shack that they call it, I thought that was the radio station, because right on the front it said 980 CKRM. So for much of my early years, I thought, that poor guy, he's all by himself. You might see one car there. And actually, I did ask an engineer here one time about that. And the engineers actually used to live in that building. Did not know that. They were on there 24 hours a day. Somebody stayed in that building. So apparently, there's kitchens there and everything. So I'd love to go see it sometime. So that's my early memories of listening to the radio.
So when did you say to yourself, I'm going to do that?
Yeah, I'm probably the opposite of most broadcasters I've talked to. Never, ever crossed my mind. Ever. Totally stumbled into it. I'm finishing grade 12, and just by chance, they had kind of a job fair or what do you want to do when you're graduating? And on the board, as some people have said, was a little pamphlet. And the first thing I saw on it was sports, and I love sports, but I was never good enough to make a living at it. But I picked it up and I read it, and it was broadcasting. I said, well, I'm thinking about going to university. My older cousins are lawyers, and I think I'd like to be a lawyer. The other thing I always wanted to be when I was a kid was a pilot for some reason. I thought that was so cool. Not that crazy about heights, so that probably wouldn't have been a good idea. But that's what started it, Brad. And I read it and I said, you know what? I'm just going to try this for a little while, and then I'll go back to university. And it was the best stumble I ever made. It was great.
Where did you start?
I started in Estevan. And again, Brad, so fortunate. So I come out of broadcasting college, and I had just finished, and it was right before Christmas, and I just had time to do a couple of tapes. But the very first tape I sent was to Estevan. And they hired me. And they called me over the Christmas holidays and said, you know, we like how you sound friendly, sound nice. Would you be interested in coming here? And they wanted me for their newsroom. But I said, we don't have a position there, but we have a position, spinning records. Would you like to do that, have some fun? So, yeah, I'd love to try anything. I'm just going to have fun. But I think why it worked out so well, Brad, now that I can look back on it, is it wasn't what I was going to do. So I felt very comfortable on the air. I wasn't worried because, well, it doesn't work out. That's not what I'm going to do anyway. But I do remember one thing about Estevan, and that was that the program director, Rick Chapman, said something to me that didn't mean anything to me at the time. But he said, you know, Perry, we have a lot of young people come through here. And let's say they do the best they can. But he said, you're going to do this the rest of your life. And I said, oh, yeah, right, man. Like, what are you talking about? And he said, no, people are really going to enjoy listening to you. So that sticks out to me, you know, after all these years.
And then from Estevan to where?
I went to CJWW. And that is a very fascinating story. I don't think this is common, but I'm on the air one day in Estevan, and I get a call while I'm on the air. And it went something like this. 1280 CJSL, maybe more like this, 1280 CJSL. And Vic Dubois was his name. And he called, and the first thing he said, which surprised me, he said, how old are you, kid? 18. And he said, you know what? We've heard a little bit about you, and we kind of like what you do, and we have a beginner position here, he called it. We'd like you to come. And I said, okay, when would I start? And he said, well, can you start right away? And I said, oh, I think it'd be appropriate to give my current employer 2 weeks' notice. And he said, well, that'd probably be good. But my memory of it, Brad, is I didn't ask how much. I didn't ask what shift. It just felt like moving to a higher level. And although I had the midday shift in Estevan, I always had this sense that, kind of maybe from playing hockey, play with the best players you can, and you'll learn that way. So I went to Saskatoon, and I had just a great time there. The memory I have of CJWW is I was never dehydrated there. So... Yeah,
I was going to say, you know, looking at the history of that station,
yeah.
you were close to the beginning. Like you were, you know, it hadn't been around that long then.
I just had the privilege of attending their 50th anniversary, and the station was fairly new at that time. But man, oh man, did I learn a ton there, because so many people were excited. It was all new to them. But when I went to the 50th anniversary, it was just great. Vic Dubois was there. The gentleman that hired me now, what is that? The fall of 83, he hired me. So I'd been in Estevan for 8 months. I went to Saskatoon. I was there for 8 months, but I was kind of joking about being dehydrated because Rod Kidder, who became a legend in Saskatoon, was on just before me. And Brad, it was so sweet. He really took me under his wing, and he'd phone me when I was getting off my shift. It was a weird shift, getting off at 1. He'd phone me about 10 to 1, and it'd be just really neat. We didn't have a private line, so I'd pick it up professionally, and then he'd just say, Bar K. Or the next night it'd be Texas T. And it was all innocent fun. But the one thing I really loved about that time in broadcasting is you would play the Midnight Rodeo Band, and then you'd see them 2-3 hours later. It was a wonderful time.
Not there very long.
No, 8 months there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then where did you end up?
I came here. And Brad, I thought I'd be here probably a year. I thought that's how it worked. And my memory of it is this, and I hope I have these facts right, because facts are important, but it's been a long time. But my memory of it was there was an opportunity at CKRM, and I had heard they had a policy they wouldn't hire anyone that didn't have at least 3 years experience. But somehow my resume, or I made a call, it got to Willie Cole. And he was kind enough to give me an interview, and we talked. And in my mind, he said something like that, you know, Perry, we really want people to have at least 3 years experience before we take them on. And I said, well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate this visit. And then we talked and talked and talked. And my memory of this is my resume was there, and I was quite proud of it. But I think he said, farm boy. I said, yeah. And then we talked some more, and he said, you know what, Perry? I'm going to make an exception. Don't let me down. Well, he was always good with the finger. Don't let me down. And I hope I didn't let Mr. Cole down.
So what was that first shift on CKRM?
Yeah. So again, the people at CJWW were, Perry, why are you doing this? Like, you have a far better shift here. So they had offered me the evening shift, but it wasn't open yet. So Will had made the promise to me that, Perry, if you'll come and just do the all nights here for a short period of time, we're going to make an adjustment and you'll have the evening. So just for a few months, I did the all night show. Willie was true to his word. I got in the evening slot and away I went. So I was 19 when I came to CKRM.
You mentioned the all night show.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that, because for all broadcasters that began in that era, all night show, that really was a playground to learn and to grow.
So great. So great. And I don't think management really cared too much. So it was a playground. I always loved putting people on the air. And again, this is not what I'm going to do for a living, Brad. I'm still living in that mode in my mind. So what the heck? Let's put them on. And, when we did talk shows, we'd use the delay. So you'd have 7 minutes if there was a problem, but not then. No, you pop them on. Somebody's, I don't know, at the bakery all night or doing whatever. And I really, really loved it. And I really think the ability to do those type of shows allowed you to become a far better broadcaster.
Now, you entered a building with a lot of talent in it. There was some giants. Some had come over from CKCK. Willie was building quite a group of talented people on air. What was that experience like? Was it a learning every day? Was it a getting better every day? Were you challenged at all by them?
I think the fact that I didn't know what I was getting into, I really didn't have a concept of how good these broadcasters were. So as a kid, I probably wasn't as intimidated as I should have been. I probably had no business being on that station with the amount of experience. I was a hard worker. I did everything asked of me. But Brad, just by listening to the radio station, you became a far better broadcaster. But I don't think I ever felt pressure from anyone. I think it was a quiet pressure on myself. Keep up here. These guys are all over the community. I take on things that management didn't even know I did. Community things I did, little MC jobs here or there. On-location broadcasts were big. I don't think the salesmen were too comfortable with me at first because I was a kid. So I took the effort and I went to broadcasts where Willie would be or Fred would be or Rick Purdy would be at that time. And I kind of watch and see how they did it. I had done some at other stations, but I hung around with the sales guys and I maybe befriended them a little bit. And before you knew it, I think I was right in the stable with everybody else and doing a lot of those broadcasts.
We joked about it before we started this, the way you're dressed. That was normal then.
Yeah.
Even though it was a country radio station, you were going out in a suit and tie.
Yeah. And I wanted to do that today because we're remembering. CKRM is celebrating its 100th birthday. And it's true. In fact, when you talk about that, it brings back a memory that I haven't thought about for a long time. And I think broadcasters probably experience this. But I used to have dreams early in my career. The one that most talk about is dead air. You have a dream of, you're sleeping and it's dead air, right? Something's not working or whatever, and you're in a panic. But the dream I had often, very in my first few years, is that my tie got caught in the turntable. And my face was being pulled out. Like, who would even think of that? And how does that get in your mind? But I'm glad you brought that up because that's a memory I haven't thought about for a long, long time.
So 1984, you came to CKRM. You are the longest tenured employee of Harvard Media. And I think there's quite a few years in there as far as distance that you have. When did you say to yourself, I guess I'm doing this now? I guess I'm on the radio.
Yeah. Probably when I moved into the afternoon drive slot in my early 20s. It didn't take long once I got to CKRM where I wasn't fooling around anymore. Not that I didn't take it serious where I was before. I tried very hard and I wanted to learn. But that's when I started to feel a little more pressure But it was only pressure put on myself. But then I think, Brad, in my early 20s, there was a lot of responsibility. The drive show was an important show. I felt it was a privilege at my age to have that show. So I feel, Brad, I did everything I could. Like I prepped like a wild man, probably over-prepped a little bit now that I look back on it. You want to be very real on the air, not over-prepped, but I didn't know any better at the time. I was doing what I thought was right. But that's it, Brad, probably in my early 20s. So maybe 4 or 5 years into it, this is something that I'm going to do and I'm going to chase and get as good as I can at it.
And by taking that afternoon show, now you're following Fred King.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that kind of experience, about having Fred in that studio when you walk in.
You probably could not have worked with a better person than Fred for someone my age. Fred made you feel so good about yourself and so comfortable. I actually love Fred King. I call the King family the first family of CKRM when I give it a chance, because I really mean that. Patty was a part of it. The boys were a part of it. Obviously, Jeff worked here for a while. Scott had some hit singles on the radio. I loved all those kids. Sean. But Fred, I'll talk about a couple things. But the first thing is my first Christmas there. So I wasn't in drive yet. And when you're a low man on the totem pole, it can be a little bit of a lonely existence. And you're going to do Christmas Day, you're going to do those kind of shifts. And I'm finishing up my shift. I think I was maybe doing the mornings that day. Anywho's, the phone rings. Perry, it's Fred King. As if I don't know. Like, he's got this incredible voice. Hi, Fred. Perry, you have nowhere to go for Christmas. I said, oh, we're fine. We're good. Well, we're good. We got things we can do. And I said, Perry, I won't have any of it. There'll be 2 seats at our table, and I expect you to be there. So we went. We had a great time. That's the kind of guy Fred was. He made you feel so good no matter what position you were on in the radio station, but working beside him on the air. So at that time, we did a request show, and I believe it was for 2 hours. So Fred would do the first hour, and I would do the second hour. And I would say Fred was like my dad, who I would do anything for. So if Fred was having a little trouble with a 45 or whatever, Perry, can you run out there and grab that? Yeah, of course I can. And then our transitions, like when I would come on and Fred would come off. He was so kind to me. So yeah, I have nothing but great things to say about Fred King, and God bless him.
Talk about back home once you were on the air. And I've asked the other icons along this lines as well. What did that mean to your family back home? What did it mean to your friends that you were suddenly on CKRM in the afternoons?
I wish they were here to answer that. But here's what I think. I think it was an immense sense of pride for my mother. For my friends, we were so close growing up, Brad, that I don't think it really changed anything. I think they were happy for me, proud of me. But we were on the same ball team, the same hockey team. We rode the same school bus. I graduated with 5 people. So I think by the time in my 20s had come, they were like my brother and sister. So I don't think it had that much impact. I think maybe more the community as a whole felt pretty good about it. But, you know, Brad, it's so hard to get in other people's heads. But I think they were proud of their local kid.
Now, you've been here the longest of anybody else, but not always in that afternoon role on CKRM. You went over to one of the sister stations. Yeah.
So in the mid-90s, a decision was made, and Harvard was going to have the first FM country station. And I had felt an immense loyalty to CKRM. I was very proud to be on CKRM. I thought we were an incredible radio station as a group. The people were top notch. And the general manager at the time came to me and he said, Perry, you haven't applied for the role to lead the new radio station. I said, John, I don't feel comfortable. John Hushy. I don't really feel comfortable because of my role on CKRM, and I'm not sure how it'll be received by my colleagues. And he said, well, you know what, Perry? We want you to apply. We're not saying you're going to get it, but we want you to apply. So I did. And then I was called into a meeting, and there were 3 finalists that they had narrowed down. Obviously, it was a very coveted position at that time. And they made the decision to go with me. And that was an incredible day, the day that launched. Tom Stationson, I consider a legendary promotion person here. He put that all together. So in limousines that morning, Charlie Major, who was the male vocalist at that time, Michelle Wright, who was the female vocalist at that time, were guests on the show that morning. For people who are longtime country music fans, Crook and Chase joined me that morning from Nashville. It was a big deal in Saskatchewan, the first FM country station. So I enjoyed that immensely. I learned so much. Before I was kind of always although I felt I was part of the team, but I was never the quarterback, right? So there I was the quarterback. And that was a great experience. So that lasted about 5 years.
And then back on CKRM.
Yeah. The company had made a decision that they thought, I think that maybe the FM country station was taking just a little bit away from CKRM, and why are we competing with ourselves? And if we change format on the FM, then I think they felt the country audience, the full audience, would be back with CKRM, and I think that is kind of how it turned out. But they wanted to make an adjustment, and then they came to me. They did have somebody in that position, I believe, and there was quite a discussion, I think, behind the scenes whether they wanted to go that way or not. And by that I mean is have me return. I think the building for the most part felt pretty good about that, but I think there were some people, like I had left CKRM, so maybe they were concerned about that. And our business loyalty is a big thing. But we were able to work through that. I think John just said, no, you're the best broadcaster. We want you on the station. And so I returned, and then I spent another 10 years on CKRM that I thoroughly enjoyed.
Before we get into the next phase, I want you to talk a little bit about community, because for CKRM and for all the people that we're talking to, that was a huge part of the job, was being in the community, a part of the community, and knowing your audience personally.
Oh, yeah, Brad. That's really what it's about. I really believe that's why I'm in Saskatchewan today. I'm sure many of the great broadcasters on CKRM had similar experiences to me, but we had the privilege to be offered some incredible jobs in other markets. And it was the community, the love of Saskatchewan, the love of my family that kept me here. So community was everything. The things that we did just because we felt a responsibility to our community. I don't regret any of those. I know the very first few years when a friend would phone, hey, we going golfing Saturday, and you weren't going golfing. Maybe a little bit at that time you thought, geez, but I don't regret flipping pancakes in Odessa. I don't regret being in the wild horse race at the Big Muddy Stampede in Bengoff, or I don't regret any of that. I'm glad I did it. And to this day, I feel really strongly about that. I don't like talking really about what I do. I like to be humble about that, but it's still an important part of who I am today.
And you have been honored by some of the groups that you've worked with because of your involvement. Yeah.
Again, Big Brothers were very kind to me. I have an honorary lifetime membership in Big Brothers. It was always important to me. So for many, many years, I was the master of ceremonies at their fundraising dinners, and I would lead the bonspiel and all those kind of things. And there were many different groups like that. That one was very important to me. My dad had been killed when I was a boy, so I knew what that was about. And I think about the little brothers. I get emotional about it. Pretty special.
Now let's change that gear.
Yeah.
You made a decision to, as we say on the on-air side of things, go over to the dark side.
Yeah. Well, I used to say that, Brad.
Right? But you may, now in our industry, that's a big change. That's a big that's a career change.
Yeah.
And what how did that come about?
I thought about it a long time, Brad. It probably took about a couple years because I loved what I was doing. But there were really two factors in my thinking there. And number one, my kids were getting to an age where they were extremely involved in things. And it was bothering me that I was missing out on some of these things. It was starting to weigh on me. Because in those days in broadcasting, if you wanted to be an elite broadcaster, you had to be all in. And I think for broadcasters, something has to go a little bit. I feel I'm a good family man, was a good family man. If I wasn't working, that's what I was focused on. But that was weighing on me a lot. And the other part too, Brad, is when you grow up within a company, and this is something that people need to learn, I learned, it is extremely hard to negotiate very good salaries when you grow up within a company. The shiny toy coming from the outside always is in a better position. And I learned that from some of the offers I received. I'm thinking, wow, that is pretty serious situation here. They want to make a move. But I don't think I was able to negotiate maybe where I thought I should be financially. Not that I wasn't treated fairly. I was. But that's the way it is. It's kind of like a sports team, right? So those were the two main things. And I saw it in the sales side. I'd worked beside these guys for years and years. And what I loved about that was, although they worked very hard, and I think I still work very hard, there was freedom. So if I wanted to go watch my son play football, then I would get to work maybe at 5 or 6. And then I might leave at 3. And that was acceptable, right? You got your work done. But the freedom was probably the biggest thing. And then the idea that you could make an unlimited income if you worked very hard. And how I saw it was, I didn't think my kids were going to have the life that I wanted them to have if I didn't get my salary to where I thought it could be. So that's really the story behind it. And it happened very quickly. I went to the program director, and when I finally made up my mind after struggling with the decision for a long time, I said, Will, I'm going to make a change. And for the reasons I explained to you. And he was very good about it. And he did say something. He said, well, though, Perry, you never have to worry. You'll always have a spot here. So I had a safe spot to land, I thought, if it didn't work out. So I went to Mr. Schuster, who was a great sales leader. And I said, this is what I'd like to do. If it works out, I'd like to have a rural territory. If something comes open, I hope you'll consider me. And he was very flattered. Of course, Perry. So I moved over to sales, and it's so incredible how it all worked out. But cleaned my desk the first day. There was just a little bit of information there, and maybe a liquid beverage in the bottom of the drawer too. And I laughed. And then at noon that very first day, Les Schuster said, Perry, we have this training. We have videotapes. You're Perry Nyhus. Just go. And he gave me my list. I love the way it was handled. There was maybe like 3/4 of a page of customers. Perry, this is where you're going to start. And they were good to me. They made sure that at the very least, I was making what I was making on the air, and maybe just a little bit more. And then, Brad, I ran with the ball. I actually, at that point, had gotten big into goals. So I was all in for 5 years. I said, I'm going to give it everything I've got for 5 years, and then see how it turns out, and then I'll decide from there. And now I've been in the sales side for 16 years. So I've kind of had two careers, I think.
And there is a uniqueness to you because you had that on-air experience. Mm-hmm. So when you did go out for sales, you had an advantage as you knew the product, you knew how things were created, you knew how things were made, you knew what was possible. So you did have those years of experience to draw on from the programming side of things.
I did not really think about it, but Brad, my whole life I was selling. Now I have the privilege quietly to coach some on-air personalities. And I might say to them, well, what's your job? They'll say, well, to entertain, get listeners. And I say, well, it's really to sell things. Sell the song. Sell the customer. And I don't mean sell in not a genuine way, but I mean, I think I was selling my whole life. And when I came off the air, one of my good friends had a little fun thing, and he listed how many songs he thought I had played and how many on-location broadcasts. And I think the number was just insane, like 3,000 on-location broadcasts, and that was with remotes, appearances, and he might have padded it a little bit, but it was an insane number. So I think, Brad, I knew what I was doing, but more than that, I don't think I've ever had a bad sales call. So the worst sales call I get is something like this, Brad. Perry, this is just not something we do, or it's just not something we're doing now, but Grandma's going to be here next Wednesday. If you're back coming through, she usually brings strudel. She'd love to visit with you. Come back. And they'd ask me all kinds of questions about former personalities. Whatever happened to Moon Mullen? Where's Ed Bain? All these kind of guys. What was it like to work with Lauren Harrison? All these kind of things. So I think, Brad, having that background really, really helped me.
And you were also able to recognize what would be productive for a client because you had that knowledge of what the products were.
I think I drove the sales managers nuts because I was just so different how I approached it. Even when I talked to Les, and then later when Karen Broderick became the sales manager, I said, I got to do it my way. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. But it was always that customer first attitude. And I always thought if you looked after people, they'd look after you. So by driving sales managers nuts, Brad, what I meant was, and to this day, Brad, I'm probably driving them nuts saying this, I don't really focus on budgets. That's somebody else's thing. I focus on you. Kind of when I was on the air, Brad, it was very important to me that I was talking to you. And when I'm in front of a customer, as you know, Brad, it's one person and nothing else exists when I'm with a customer. Their business, this is their livelihood. And one of the great things about being in sales, you have a whole new appreciation of what an on-air personality should be doing. So when we're given scripts to perform, to do a commercial for a customer, there's somebody behind that. This is somebody's investment. And Brad, during COVID, I had a whole new experience. When you sit across from somebody and they're in their truck, you're in yours because you're not supposed to get together, and your arms on the window, just like we would have been in downtown Ceylon visiting with a friend on a Saturday night, and they're in tears because they could lose their business. This is serious business. So pay attention to who's in front of you and make sure they're the most important thing. So I kind of come full circle on your question.
Now, just backing up a little bit, were there regrets as far as now I don't get to talk to those superstars? Now I don't get to, have the big interview. I don't get to have the main stage at Craven. Mm-hmm. I don't get those experiences anymore. Were there regrets, or is that something you were willing to accept and say, no, it's time to move on?
I was willing to accept. I think the mourning for what I had already taken place. By the time I decided to make the change, I'd already mourned that. This is going to be a loss, Perry, of something that's been truly important to you. And some of your friendships in the music industry, they're not going to be quite what they were. But it was an acceptance. It was a change. I think in my heart, maybe even today, I still think someday I'll find my way back to my true love. But I did it for my family.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to throw some names at you, and because you have spanned such a long time, I'm not going to be able to cover everyone because you have done this for many years. But let's talk. You talked about Fred King. Willie Cole, you've touched on. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on Willie Cole.
I wish I would have gotten to know Willie better, and people might be surprised. But I think when you're in a boss role and an employee role, it's just a little bit different. But I really respected Willie. Willie's work ethic was fantastic. And I think I work hard. Boy, oh boy, you had to work hard to keep up with Mr. Cole. And he was all in. And I think the word that comes to mind when I think of Will is respect. I respect Willie.
Lauren Harrison.
Complicated. I love Lauren. I did not know Lauren when I started. I found him extremely intimidating, almost scary. And as I got to know him, I've come to find out what a wonderful guy he is. Like, I wish the listeners could have known the Lauren that I've come to know. I want to tell you one thing about Lauren. He came to me once and just shocked me. He said, Perry, my son, Paul, is a big Boston Red Sox fan. I understand you're a Red Sox fan. Yeah. I'm going to Fenway Park. If you can kick me a few bucks, maybe I can pick you up some things. Like, this is not something I think most people would think Lauren would do. I still have my Roger Clemens jersey. I have a belt buckle. He got me a bunch of things. So, I really like Lauren. I love our visits. He's invited me to come on Fridays to a gathering, and I just haven't had a chance. But boy, oh boy, I hope I get an opportunity to have more visits with Lauren. He's a very interesting person.
Rod Peterson.
So proud of Rod. Rod used to phone me when he was a kid in Milestone. And I tease Rod quite a bit. Oh, Brad, would I love to have those tapes. Rod has a beautiful voice. He's a great presenter. But he didn't quite sound like that when he was a kid. And my memories of it are just so great. He just loved George Strait. And he would call, and I was always happy when he called. I'd take the call and say, hey, Perry, it's Rod from Milestone. Can I hear Baby Blue by George Strait? And then we'd have a little visit. And Willie was a good friend with Rod's dad. And the first time I met Rod, Willie actually called me and said, Perry, I'm going with Mr. Peterson. I think it was a Pat banquet. And he wants to bring his son. He's just a young guy. Maybe he'd like to come along. Give Rod somebody to chat with. So that's when I met Rod. I can't remember how old he was, but he was a young man. And I always pulled for Rod. And I think Rod has become an incredible broadcaster. I'm a huge fan. He is elite at what he does. And we still talk regularly, probably once a month. I wish him well. Miss him.
Jim Smalley.
I have probably enjoyed my time with Jim as much as anybody I ever worked with. Jim is just like many of the farmers I grew up with. He is so genuine. And what he loves passionately. He loves Saskatchewan. He loves farmers. He loves agriculture. He loves coins. And after he retired, Brad, I made time and I went to a coin show with Jim and just sat with him. The people that come to see Jim Smalley, they just think he walks on water. And he does it just by being himself. Yeah. The country cookouts, when he come and be a guest, man, oh man, he's a rock star. Good person. Good person.
You've talked about Fred, but Jeff King.
Yeah. Oh, wow. He's in the same mold of his dad. His dad would be very proud of his son. Jeff is what I think I am. He's a heart guy. And he's right up my alley. When Jeff came here, I think I really gravitated to him probably because of my respect for Fred, but I wanted Jeff to succeed. I really wanted to encourage him. So I think I did that in small little ways, but never in a way like, oh man, I'm going to help this guy. Not like that. Just I want him to succeed and to see the success he's had and how much he loves his kids and stuff. Oh, there's another guy I can't wait to see when we celebrate our 100th. Jeff King. Great guy.
Colin Lovequist.
Yeah, my best friend at work, for sure. Background like me, small town guy from Broadview. Lovequist, Swedish name. Nyhus, Norwegian name. Nyhus. I still laugh every time somebody says that to me, because a family member one time, when they first met me on the outlaw side, very first time, Nyhus. He's kind of Swedish and he talked that way. But after that, he called me Outhus all the time. From then on, he'd laugh every time. Sorry to get off track. It just made me think of it and smile. But to Colin, we joke. Probably my favorite thing during the day when I can make time is Colin has a little bit of time over lunch. So we'll have lunch together. He's working on his computer and we talk music. I love talking music. I love country music. And Colin and I talked about this recently. There's very few people that you can have a conversation with that can really relate to almost everything you can relate to. And that's the relationship I have with Colin. Colin is truly an icon, and he did it just by being himself. And if there's one thing we could say to young broadcasters, try to hang on to that. It's not that easy to be yourself. But if you can be yourself, and then you go down being who you want to be, win or lose. So, I'm a huge Colin Lovequist fan. Number one's at 1. I just want to take an hour off and have my lunch later. I miss it all the time, but I love Colin.
Now, he too, of course, is still currently on the air.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about Cody and Gloria.
Yeah, you know what? They continue the tradition of CKRM. So maybe it's kind of a little bit easier to talk about each individually. Gloria is what you call a broadcaster who is about the community piece we talk about. So we had the good fortune recently to be recognized at the legislature, and by that I mean CKRM and some of the people that attended. And in the legislature, somebody had mentioned that Gloria had just been to an event the night before, and that's what Gloria's about. So I will find out things that just blow me away. So I'll get a call and say, well, Gloria was by and she knew it was my birthday and brought a cupcake or drop off a card. These are to our customers, our listeners, our friends. Gloria's the type of person that does those things we talked about, Brad, that most people never know about, that are really important in relationships, whether that's with your listener, in a sales standpoint. She's been a great asset, and she's carried on those traditions of CKRM. Cody, gliding across Saskatchewan. Cody's doing a great job. And Cody, to me, just continues to get better and better and better. I really like listening to Cody. He's friendly. That's what I like. Some of my best memories of Cody are near his hometown. We'll often travel together to Kennedy. The Moose Mountain Pro Rodeo is a long-time rodeo, and it really is a special rodeo. And Cody and I will have great visits there and back. And we'll talk about music, as Colin and I do. All of us love country music. Gloria loves country music. We're just nuts about it. We can talk about who the writers were, when it came out, where we were when the music was released, all of that. But my favorite thing about Cody Glyden is he is Saskatchewan. He really, really loves Saskatchewan. And when we stop in Momart every year on our way back, we have a maple walnut there at the little ice cream place, and there's always somebody that comes up and wants to talk radio with Cody and I. So, yeah, CKRM can be proud to be represented by those two folks.
Now, some of the salespeople that you worked with, talk about some of them.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate in a couple ways, Brad. We talked about when I came here, the incredible broadcasters, probably the best broadcasters in the history of Saskatchewan were on that radio station at that time. And I think you might be able to argue that on the sales side. Most of those guys were nearing the end of their career as I came over. So again, all of a sudden I'm sitting beside these guys with tons of experience, really believed what I believed in, relationships. And again, just by being around these people, you learn so much. So I do want to mention some names. Les Schuster. Les was a very good person, very kind. I think one time they had Who's the Heart of CKRM, and I think the staff voted Les Schuster. Still contact Les a lot. Love him and Sandy. Can't remember the whole story now, I forget, but Sandy got on the train or the bus or something, went to Moose Jaw by mistake, so I tease her every time. Bob Polowitz. Bob was very, very steady. Like, I just love Bob, steady. And just by watching how he would speak to clients, you could pick up some things from Bob. Ron Ulmer was a passionate guy. You know, he wanted to be there for the Pats events, and we're going to make sure everybody gets a hot dog, get it quick, get the pop going, like always moving. Maybe a little stressful for me, but those are the kind of guys you need. But probably the guy that stands out to me the most, though, and is Jim Sullivan. Just because Jim had looked after some of the clients I looked after, and Jim asked me to make a promise before he passed away. So I worked with Jim for about 30 years. And Brad, I got to know him more in the last year of his life than in the other 29. So I sat in his living room, we'd watch the ball games and we'd talk, but the promise. And he listed some customers. He said, Perry, if you're looking after these, I want you to do everything you can. And I did. And I used to joke with some of these people. Most of them have now moved on or handed down the business, and I called it the Sully package. And it was nothing special. It was just a little extra effort that Mr. Sullivan did. But when I go out on the road, people still talk about Jim Sullivan. And I really think it's because he cared so much about the people he worked with. Just before, I know we're taking lots of time, but the other guys that just come to mind for me were guys that made the job so much fun. Fred Allery, Mike Monroe. We'd have coffee in the morning. We'd just take a minute. Mike would go on one of his rants and we'd laugh and have fun. I think the great thing about CKRM is the fact that people were able to enjoy their careers and have so much fun making a living. What more can you ask than that?
Now,
sorry, Brad. Karen Broderick. When we get talking, you do not want to leave out important people. So Karen walked with me almost the whole way from secretary, and she ascended to the highest levels of management. But the thing I loved about Karen, she had the ability to see things that maybe other managers didn't. And by that I mean is Karen never overmanaged. Like, I loved Karen. She says, Perry, you know all about this. And I said, well, yeah, but Karen, this deal's a little bit different. I want you to be aware of it. But she knew how to get out of the way of talent. And I think that's really, really important, not to overmanage it. And I always think of Don Cherry when I think of these things. So how did you coach Bobby Orr? I opened the door. That was Karen.
If you've forgotten anyone else, you can blame me that I moved on to this part. We started talking about the 100th anniversary in October of 2024. You were a part of that very initial discussion. This has been a passion for you. This celebration has been a passion for you more than anyone else. Sure, your longevity here is one thing, but you really feel CKRM.
I feel a responsibility. And I've had some incredible experiences this year with on-air personalities. I had one yesterday, Brad, that I haven't had a chance to tell him, but I'm excited to tell him. So Dave Bast is his name. One of the young ladies that work with me came down and says, there's a guy here, I don't know. There's nobody around. You're the only working here today. Can you come? What's his name? Dave Bast. Dave Bast? I worked with him at CJWW in 1984. Like you're an old man, right? So good. I'm so excited. And Dave brought us a whole pile of information. He was working here during the 50th anniversary. So we had all kinds of great visits. But these are the type of people coming out of the woodwork is not what I mean. But these are people now that are sharing what it meant to them. And that has been great. But yeah, I feel deeply about it because I feel a responsibility as the person that's here and has these memories to really stand up and say, this has been one of the greatest companies, radio stations in the history of Saskatchewan. Let's make sure that people know. Let's shout from the rooftops of all the wonderful things that this station has done. The community work, the raising money for sick children, all of these kind of things. But I think what I'm the most passionate about it is for the people who can't be here anymore. Their work is remembered. And if I can play a small role in that, that's what I'm trying to do.
We were at a different event where it came up that you have worked for the Hill family for 3 generations of Hills. Talk a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah, that is really something when you think about it. And when I walk on the mall here, the Fred Hill Mall, Scar Street Mall, some people refer to, and I see Fred's statue, I guess you call it there. And then I think about him. I did not know him well, but I got to know him. And I feel I know Paul and Carol very well. So to work for, now Matt, for grandfather, dad, son, what a privilege to work for family that cares as deeply about Saskatchewan as many of us do. I really believe, don't want to speak for them, they could take their business wherever they want. And they've chosen to do a lot of it here in Saskatchewan. They have a deep passion for all of the things in Saskatchewan, and Paul has certainly a deep passion for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. But my conversations with Paul and Carol have always been very, very professional. When I leave, have been a massive privilege to work with them. Carol and I, we had the best visits because she was from Yellowgrass. So we get to talk about small town things. But you know what I find about whether it's the Hills, whether it's superstar artists, very well-known politicians, when it comes right down to it, they're not much different than us. They've just done some special things. So, working for the Hill family, this company, all the people that have worked here can feel very, very good that those people are running the ship.
Closing thoughts. You mentioned our celebration that's coming up in July, where people are going to be gathering, icons are going to be gathering, and the general public and clients and everyone is gathering to celebrate the 100 years. It's kind of a homecoming, isn't it?
Oh, certainly, Brad. And I really feel that if CKRM was ever part of your life, you really don't want to miss this opportunity. Life goes blazing by. And this is an opportunity to stop for a minute. Just stop. Enjoy what you accomplished. If you worked here at one time, please come. Please feel free to walk up to these people who maybe at one time you thought, oh man, they're far more approachable than you think. No, Brad, it is going to be an unbelievable event and something that people will never, ever forget. So whether you were a past employee, whether you were a listener, whether you were an artist. I bumped into Mark Smith from the Poverty Plainsman just the other day. And he said, yes, I got my tickets. I'm coming. Don't miss an opportunity. It's like that family. I'm kind of busy. And no. And then after you go, Brad, you go, geez, I'm so glad I went. This is one of those. So, closing thoughts on the 100th part of it. We don't know where life goes. We don't know what happens in the future. But 100 years in a time of massive change in the world is a big accomplishment for anything.
And one more thought. You're not done. You're still here, and you're still working here, and you'll be here in the 101st year as well. Maybe just close on that. The concept of you get to see it now continue and move on.
I'm excited. I'm an eternal optimist. I'm always curious what's coming, and things are changing rapidly. And I just see in life there's a bit of a turn back to the things that we always felt were special, the goodness in people. So I'm optimistic that there's things to look forward to. Oh yeah, I just do not see people like myself who are all in ever really retiring. If we're not doing this, working every day, we're going to be part of that community we talked about. We're going to be at your neighbor's hockey game. We're going to be cheering for Saskatchewan in anything that they do. I'm optimistic, Brad. I really think there's a future for all the great things that we love and that are part of Saskatchewan. So I remain optimistic, and I'm looking forward to, if not the next 100, maybe a couple more years anyway.
All right, Perry, thanks for doing this.
Oh, Brad, thank you. I could talk all day long about CKRM and the wonderful people. So I appreciate this and the opportunity to share a few thoughts. Thank you.